Welcome back, everyone. Great day so far at the Emerging Growth Conference. Let's welcome our next presenter. We have Todos Medical Ltd. It trades on the OTCQB under the symbol TOMDF and engineers life-saving diagnostic solutions for the early detection of a variety of cancers. Please welcome back its CEO, Gerald Commissiong. Welcome back, Gerald.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone for listening in today. I'm going to spend some time talking about the progress we've made with our subsidiary, 3CL Pharma, and then provide an update on where we're going with our diagnostic products. So just a little bit of a reminder about what the company's doing. We have solutions in immune support, supplementation, therapeutic drug candidates, as well as in vitro diagnostics. We produce revenue primarily through our diagnostics division, although we are seeing a ramp up in our dietary supplement business. The revenue in the diagnostics is primarily from COVID, although we are expanding, and I'll talk about that beyond COVID. And we do have future potential revenue in our diagnostics business via these life-saving proprietary diagnostics in cancer, as well as Alzheimer's disease. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we have our subsidiary, 3CL Pharma, that's developing 3CL protease-related products and services for the community. So just a little bit about Todos. Since the pandemic started, we have really focused in on COVID-19 and addressing it because we believe COVID-19 will be ubiquitous. We do we do obviously understand that COVID is still a significant problem in the U.S. There are lots of vaccinations out there in the marketplace. However, booster and now second booster shot uptake is relatively low, which is problematic, especially because the current vaccines are for the old strain. We did hear this morning Moderna had an updated Omicron variant vaccine that's coming on, but it seems that that's a BA.1 vaccine. So there's still a lot to learn about how that might improve vaccine performance. So the next phase is clearly antiviral therapeutics. They're being pushed extensively by the government. The primary one is Paxlovid from Pfizer. And there's significant orders for acute COVID. Now, beyond acute COVID, what we're finding, of course, is that approximately 20% of patients who get COVID will end up with what they call long COVID, or post-acute sequelae of COVID. This is becoming the major component of the pandemic because as the death rate comes down and the risk of dying is reduced, either because those who are most vulnerable have already passed away, or we're in the middle of a little bit of a period where reinfections are not yet severe enough to cause more severe disease among those who have been reinfected multiple times. And we don't know exactly when that scale will tip. The death rate is down. With that said, the disability rate is up. And so, and the disability rate is much, much higher than the death rate. And so now we're dealing with a 20% likelihood of long COVID as a result of COVID infection. And we're starting to learn what that means at a population level. So this is now, in our estimation at Todos, the pandemic is long COVID. And so there are two issues. One, hospitalization, obviously reducing death once you're in the hospital, that's paramount. And two, limiting disability once you have COVID. Those are the two key things. And if you do get long COVID, then obviously therapeutic options. So a little bit about 3CL Pharma. We own 60% of it. We did get a $1.98 billion independent valuation on it. We acknowledge that we're not anywhere near that market cap, but we think we're substantially undervalued from where our market cap is today. And so what we see as we move forward is an opportunity to capture some of that value through capitalization of this entity outside of the Todos capital structure. So the way we look at it, doing this and creating this 3CL Pharma spinoff, of which Todos is a majority holder, maximizes shareholder value for Todos investors. It minimizes dilution needed because the dilution will take place at the subsidiary level, at the parent level, and the subsidiary has a much higher valuation than the parent. We're creating highly focused management team for this, as well as attractive positioning for big pharma, because as a therapeutics-focused entity, 3CL Pharma we won't have to segregate out the diagnostics. And of course, we have worldwide licensing potential of the dietary supplement as well, secondarily to the therapeutic drug candidate. But let's talk a little bit about 3CL Pharma. And first of all, the name 3CL is all about the 3CL protease. And the role of the 3CL protease in virus reproduction is quite important. One, obviously, is that the protease allows for the polyproteins, which are the strings of virus strung together that have replicated. Those need to be cut or cleaved into individual virion in order for that virion to go out and escape the hijacked cell and go hijack another cell. So that's one of the primary things that the protease does. It cleaves the individual virions so they can go out and infect other cells. The other thing that the protease does, one of the key things, is when the virus hijacks a cell, it produces massive amounts of protease, and that protease goes out throughout the body and cleaves a cell surface receptor called NEMO, which is NF-kappa beta essential modulator. And NEMO is effectively the alarm system for the local cellular immunity. And that alarm system, when activated, turns on a sprinkler system, which is an immune response. When that alarm system is cleaved, then there is no immune response. And that's one of the reasons why you don't get an early immune response in response to COVID, because the immune system is downregulated by the 3CL protease. What that allows is for higher increased viral replication. And then by the time you figure it out, then there's an overstimulation in response to high amounts of virus. And that's when you can get the body attacking itself through an autoimmune cytokine storm. So these are, the areas of progress of the virus, and the 3CL protease is related to all of them. Looking in terms of how this plays out, stage 1, early infection, blocking the immune system from responding, speeding replication of the virus. Once that is identified, then the second thing that happens is there becomes potentially an autoimmune attack, which can be the pulmonary phase. And that's really the acute stage phase where you start to get some of these quite significant symptoms. And then as time goes on, you can end up, if you progress poorly, in the hyperinflammation stage. And that's when that can lead you to the hospital. There's now another stage that's being added, which is when the virus hides from the immune system, similar to HIV. And when that happens, the immune system doesn't recognize it, and then it can pop out at times over a longer period of time. And that's when you can get long COVID, and that's the chronic stage. So, the COVID, the 3CL protease involvement in both COVID and long COVID is quite substantial. And we believe that this is one of the key targets to go after. And it's a validated target because Pfizer from Paxlovid from Pfizer is already in the market and is the #1 drug for the treatment of acute COVID. But it has issues, which we'll talk about. So let's talk about our candidate, Tolovir, and how we address it. So this is a phase 2-3 ready drug candidate for COVID-19. We're in this phase 2 is completed in Israel, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But we are preparing for the phase 2-3. We have the protocol synopsis, and we're preparing to engage the FDA. The key aspects of Tolovir are, one, its ability to inhibit the 3CL protease. So very much 3CL protease inhibition is a mode of action #1. But there is a second component, a second compound within the Tolovir drug candidate that inhibits the cytokine storm. So this is a dual mechanism drug. It is not just a 3CL protease drug. And for that reason, that's the reason why we think it can work not only very early in the disease, potentially prophylaxis, all the way through to late stage, as well as post-acute sequelae of COVID, long COVID. So that's a critical component. Tolovir affects both viral replication and cytokine storm. When you position Tolovir within the context of other oral antivirals, obviously the new one that is being looked at, and recently an EUA application was accepted and there's going to be reviewed by the FDA, is Veru. That's another small company, not too dissimilar from 3CL Pharma, that had a successful phase 2-3 study at the interim endpoint, and there was a significant increase in valuation around that data point. We think that is kind of the model that we look at for Tolovir as we get ready for the phase 2/3 study. And we expect that, provided it's successful, we will move in the same direction. Obviously, the other aspects are remdesivir. We know there was an inhalable version of remdesivir they're trying to get out of the market to expand the uses beyond the hospital. That failed. So remdesivir is still standard of care in the hospitalized setting. Molnupiravir is a drug from Merck that's mutagenic. It has significantly lower uptake than Paxlovid in the United States in terms of distribution, and then Paxlovid is the outpatient competitor that Tolovir is most compared with. And that is a 3CL protease inhibitor only, does not act on the cytokine storm. So a little bit about Tolovir's phase 2 study. It was 31 patients hospitalized. There were 2 different formulations. The first 11 patients were on a anti-cytokine only mixture. After we saw the results from the first 11 patients, we began to really understand the need for the not only the anti-cytokine as well as the anti-3CL. So we reformulated and then restarted the study with the final 20 subjects, and that's really the focus. It's 10 days on treatment. The endpoints include time to clinical improvement, days in the hospital, death, obviously, time to deterioration and needs for supplemental oxygen, as well as biomarkers. And so really this part 2 on the 20 patients is where all the focus is, because that's where we've really developed this. And so that trial design is randomized. So there's 2 arms, standard of care plus Tolovir 4 times daily versus placebo plus standard of care. So this is placebo controlled, 11 patients in the treated arm, 9 patients in the control arm. And the key data points that emerged, and remember, this is 10 days of treatment. And that's also something we learned, that we could treat for longer. But the bottom line is, when you look at the Tolovir arm versus the placebo arm, there was a 7-day reduction in time in the hospital, down from 17 days to 10 days. There was 0% mortality while on drug with Tolovir versus 22% on placebo. There was you improved to the key endpoint of clinical improvement 3 days faster. It's critical to note that 100% of the patients in the Tolovir group achieved clinical improvement, and 1 deteriorated and passed away. That's why there's a 9% all-cause death. That happened well after treatment was withdrawn. So the outcome from that, from our clinical development perspective, is that we need to treat for longer for certain patients. And if they begin to deteriorate again, then you administer again. But that's the key. And as well as there was fewer patients needed supplemental oxygen. And if you did need supplemental oxygen, you were on it for a lower period of time. So across the board, there were significant improvements on Tolovir as compared with the placebo. And we also saw in all the biomarkers that were evaluated as of January, we also saw significant improvements on the Tolovir arm versus the placebo arm. So in terms of our regulatory strategy, now we're preparing for a phase 2/3 for this dual action antiviral anti-cytokine solution in hospitalized patients. We do have the phase 2/3 trial synopsis drafted now, and we are preparing to request a pre-IND meeting with the FDA to engage on what that phase 2/3 hospital design is going to look like now that things have cleared up a little bit in terms of what standard of care might be. We think we'll be in a good position to really prepare and advance a phase 2/3 clinical study. So that is our drug candidate Tolovir, and that is the vast majority of the $1.99 billion valuation of the subsidiary 3CL Pharma. With that said, we do have a dietary supplement on the market called Tolovid, for which we do market it as a 3CL protease inhibitor supplement, 3CL protease only. We began marketing this in late 2020. Some of the commercial data allowed us to really understand how best to use it. And we now have several certificate of free sales from the FDA for both acute use over a 5-day period, as well as chronic use over, on an ongoing basis, on a monthly basis, daily. And we're now figuring out what we're going to do within the context of our new customer base. So just a little bit about the market. because a lot of people ask, well, you have the drug candidate, so why are you doing the supplement? And one of the things that's happened over the course of COVID-19, of course, is that immune boosting supplements have taken off substantially. So there is a big market for immune boosting supplements, over $130 billion worldwide. Over 35% of Americans take supplements on a daily basis, and 20% of Americans take supplements alongside different medications for different diseases. So in the absence of medication, Americans and others turn towards supplements to see if they can find relief. And this is something that was expanded upon in the COVID-19 pandemic, and a trend that we see continuing to move forward. So there is a significant market for Tolavid beyond the drug candidate market for Tolavir. Just a little bit about some of the work that was done with Tolavid. So there was an observational clinical study done within the context of hospitalized COVID-19. We see the results here. There was significant reduction in deaths, so there were 0 deaths in that study. No patients deteriorated to respirator, and there was significant reduction in CRP biomarkers. So this is all non-controlled data. There was an observational group. But obviously very reassuring if you look at the Tolavir group alone, the fact that in a hospitalized setting, those 11 patients had that outcome obviously is quite important, and we think speaks to some of the value that some of the customers that Tolavid, some of the customers that are using Tolavid see. Now, obviously that data within the acute setting of COVID in the hospital is great. But now where the majority of the interest is actually in long COVID. So when we originally put Tolavid on the market, obviously it's not approved to diagnose, treat, prevent, or cure any disease, including COVID or long COVID. But marketing it as a dietary immune support supplement that inhibits the 3CL protease, people used it within the context of COVID. And it seems as though they saw success in that area. And after reports of Paxlovid's success in certain long COVID patients, then people began to explore with Tolavid. And it seems now that the long COVID community has embraced Tolavid, and that is quickly becoming our largest customer base. So we now have 3 sets of data gathering to buttress the use of Tolavid within the context of long COVID. One, we have a case study series. We have 35 plus case studies ongoing, of which we reported some progress in 5 of those 35 case studies. We have several other case studies for which we're gathering data, and we have interesting findings. So this is something we intend to continue, and it's not clear how long we're going to follow some of these customers, but provided they're going to want to continue to give us data, we think it would be very helpful. And this is really that this data, along with a survey that's being sent out to our customers from the My Tolavid website, who are filling it out to allow us to get some of the real world data and some of the metrics that they've used, what they've used our products for. Again, most people have used it for COVID or long COVID. So any data that we gather from there would be real world evidence that could further support, some of the hypotheses we're putting together for our formal clinical studies. And we do have clinical studies planned. We have a synopsis ready. And now we are in discussions with different long COVID clinics to finalize the protocol and hopefully initiate that study over the summer. We are going to be raising capital specifically to fund long COVID clinical studies and the expansion of the supply chain, and hopefully be able to further reduce the cost of Tolavid. And so, we need to raise capital to do that so we can attract scale. And so we will be coming out to the marketplace with an offering specifically for 3CL Pharma around this. Some of the interesting things that we're seeing from the case studies in long COVID, it looks like, the symptoms are being impacted, and it's allowing us to develop some recommendations and actually make some decisions with regard to commercial aspects. So we created new pricing schemes around larger volume purchases of Tolavid, because that's where we're seeing benefit from the long COVID community. They have to use it for a longer period of time than in the case of acute. So some of the top symptoms addressed and some of the key symptoms associated are within the context of fatigue. So we're definitely seeing people say they improve on fatigue. We're seeing people say they improve over time, brain fog and headaches, neuropathy, So, hypersensitivity to touch, as well as muscle twitching. Erectile dysfunction, we put out an update on a case study yesterday within that context. We've also seen improvement in libido in women. So both of these, I think, are vastly underreported because there's so many other issues, but these are issues that are coming up. Post-exercise malaise is something where we've seen people have benefit. That is variable, and some people push a little too hard, and then the post-exercise malaise comes back, but it's less than it was when they weren't on Tolavid. And so that's something that, we want to monitor how people can ramp up their exercise. Definitely seeing gastrointestinal benefit using Tolavid, as well as tachycardia POTS. People have reported that there's benefit. Tinnitus has gone down for certain people with Tolavid, as well as insomnia. So as we look at this, we see this list of symptoms obviously being quite important. We need to understand, how Tolavid is, focused and able to address some of these. And so that's what all of this data gathering we're doing, so we can make further recommendations to help our clients. But obviously, we're very happy to see that some of our customers are getting relief on Tolavid. So now within the context of long COVID, obviously it's great to get some case studies and to get some customer reports. But really, the scale of the problem is such that you need a regulatory strategy to engage with it. Right now, it appears, on the market, we're one of the only products that long COVID, individuals with long COVID appear to be having some symptomatic relief. And, that's really the role of supplements to help and support, maintain healthy immune function. So it seems as though it's been doing that within the context of long COVID. So obviously we have some initial case studies. One of the most interesting aspects is Paxlovid. So people have reported rebound with Paxlovid. Long COVID patients have reported benefit and then rebound following withdrawal of Paxlovid. And so it appears that Tolavid could be a great product to help buttress and further cleanse the 3-cell protease after Paxlovid use, and to prevent further rebound after Paxlovid withdrawal. So that's something that we're going to continue to monitor, because that could be quite valuable given just the scale of how much Paxlovid is being prescribed. So, all of these things are really leading us into the next direction. And it's pretty clear that we see value in this, and we're also developing Tolo tests, which we think ultimately could end up being a test for long COVID. If there is viral persistence and you're not seeing it in upper respiratory tract, nasopharyngeal, or antigen tests, we think that could resolve that. So now going into the rest of Todos, that was all 3CL Pharma, for which we're going to be putting together an offering and raising capital specifically focused to drive long COVID research and drive marketing around Tolavid, and hopefully be able to further reduce the costs so we can expand the market base to larger aspects of the long COVID community. The next thing, obviously, is the base business of Todos. And there we have our revenue producing products and services. So we have our Provista Diagnostics testing lab and our Corona Diagnostics supplies business. We saw the businesses grow from $5 million in revenue in 2020 to over $12 million in 2021. We do expect that revenue to continue to grow. However, it's going to grow largely based upon diversification outside of COVID, as well as expansion into long COVID. So we have a fully automated PCR testing lab down in Atlanta, Georgia, that we're doing our COVID testing. And now we are at the tail end of validating our UTI assay for launch, which has several competitive advantages in order to allow for treatment selection. And then we also see other tests coming online using PCR, as well as we're in the midst of validating testing assays for long COVID, beginning with fecal PCR. And in fact, in our case study series, many of those patients are sending in fecal PCR samples. So we're gathering data within the context of long COVID using the supplement and engaging with the long COVID community. And we're hopeful to have significant findings that could really expand our understanding and hopefully lead to better options and solutions for patients. In terms of our Corona Diagnostics sales, we have found some good partners who are able to expand the testing business to things outside of just COVID. as well as certain aspects of COVID. For example, we distribute the Lumira DX assay, which can be done in 17 minutes. So we have several clients now that are coming online within the Corona Diagnostics. And we sell a full suite of consumables and equipment. And so we've expanded dramatically in that area. Now, all of that revenue that was generated and is continuing to be generated, that we are looking to see expand, and we're looking to really drive that ramp, because as we expand to other tests, then we can grab not only the COVID testing, but the other tests from a larger and larger group of people. And that's how we really see the business moving upwards. And we have a chief commercial officer named Philippe Goua, who's got an excellent track record in driving revenue higher. And his ultimately his real interest is in our proprietary diagnostics, because that will allow us to capture significant market share in multiple areas, starting with cancer. And the test that we're most focused on is the Videssa breast cancer test. And within that context, the initial data that was published was all around dense breasts, so BI-RADS 3, BI-RADS 4, inconclusive mammogram. Approximately 30 million women in the country get mammograms, 40% of which come back inconclusive. There's a $7 billion market for post-mammogram testing, for which there are really no adequate non-invasive solutions. And that's where we think, in that $7 billion pot, where Videssa, our breast cancer test, can play. In terms of the data, we've gathered 92% plus sensitivity and over 98% negative predictive value with Videssa, based upon analysis done by Boston Healthcare, which is a third-party consulting firm. If Videssa were adopted broadly, we could potentially reduce biopsies by 45%, which is quite significant. There are over 3 prospective trials completed with over 1,000 patients. And these trials were done with some of the top centers in the country: Stanford, Harvard, Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, MD Anderson. And so we feel very comfortable that the data is quite solid. We also have a blood test for Alzheimer's disease, for which we are waiting confirmatory data. And that is all based on cell cycle dysregulation, which is a cancer mechanism. And so our ultimate strategy is to use both of the data sets captured and the volume from the breast cancer test, Videssa, and the Limpro test, to be able to create our AI-driven algorithms for our long-term TBIA cancer screen, which is a new platform we're bringing to market for a pan-immunology test, cancer, Alzheimer's, as well as several other aspects of the immune system. So this is AI-based, so we need more inputs. And that's really what we think Videssa and Limpro will be able to ultimately help drive and transition the adoption over an extended period of time. This is not immediate. This is 3 to 4 years down the road, where we can ultimately reduce the cost and expand the utility for greater surveillance using the TBIA assay. Ultimately, our management team, Dr. Jorge Leon, who's the chief medical officer associated with infectious disease and oncology, and Philippe Goua, our chief commercial officer, are the key executives helping us drive both the expansion of the testing business as well as the Videssa breast cancer test launch, which we expect to happen in the first half of 2023. And with that, I'd like to thank you for listening to the presentation, and I open the floor to questions.
Great job, Gerald. Okay, we do have some questions for you. Let's start with Chris Diaz. What's your plan for raising capital for 3CL Pharma?
So our plan for 3CL Pharma is to raise capital using crowdfunding. There's a large community of long COVID patients who are looking for solutions for their conditions, and so they're highly motivated. And we have a commercial product that can be used today, which is a dietary supplement. We understand that those are really the most successful campaigns when you have commercial products that investors have a strong need for, and that can drive people to invest as well as get access to the product in the customer base. So that's our initial plan. Once we get up and running and we get confirmation from the FDA for our phase 3 trial design, then we think we'll be ready for institutions, at which point we'll do a private 506C Reg D and raise private capital from institutions.
And Joe Bowman wants to know, are you noticing any trends in the long COVID case studies that you can share with investors?
Yeah, we're noticing quite a lot actually. So obviously the number one symptom associated with long COVID is fatigue, and we're definitely seeing a significant response to fatigue. It does with the next thing, which may be directly associated with fatigue, is heart, let's call it POTS or tachycardia, heart rhythm issues that many are seeing normalize following use of COVID. So, those things may be directly related. And then we're also seeing over time changes in brain fog and ability to concentrate. So we think ultimately that all of these issues, almost every single one of the top issues, are related to the ability of oxygen to transfer from the blood into the tissue. And that is, there's a publication that came out in Nature Neuroscience that identified that the 3CL protease actually impairs the ability of oxygen to transfer from the blood into the tissues. And so we hypothesize that the intervention with a 3CL protease inhibitor there eliminates that or significantly reduces it, allows oxygen to transfer. And as a result of that, that is one of the key reasons why there's benefit. Now, what we're also finding is that there's variability in terms of neutralizing antibodies response from patients. So in the absence of neutralizing antibodies, then the question is, how can you stop the virus if there is viral persistence, which we suspect is the only way through which 3CL protease inhibitors can work, is the viral persistence. With that viral persistence, how can you clear the virus? That's the immune system that does that. So we've monitored that there are, many patients that do not mount a neutralizing antibody immune response. And for them, they may actually have to take 3CL protease inhibitors for a much longer period of time and hopefully mount an immune response over time. Whereas there are others that do mount an immune response, but it takes time for that immune response to mount. And it seems as though it's reasonably proportional to, inversely proportional to their ability to titer down on Tolovit. So, as your immune system ramps up, then it interacts with the virus, and then, you can ramp down on supporting the immune system. But that transition from support to maintenance is really variable. And so we're monitoring that closely. And it doesn't appear to be a straight line because people, especially long COVID, they have what they call crashes. And when that happens, it seems as though there are other things going on in the immune system that are hyperactivated. So I think one of the keys is really trying not to have a crash as you're getting better. So there is a strong desire when people haven't been doing something for a long time, they immediately feel better on the Tolovit, then they go out and they start, having a lot of activity, and then there's a crash. And then you may not come back to where you were before you started, but you may not have had that kind of stair-step improvement. So, this is really a process. A lot of these long COVID patients really are damaged in very fundamental ways, and it does take time for their bodies to heal. And so, the number one thing that we would recommend is no matter how great you feel, take it easy and take your time as you get better. Don't push yourself so that you don't end up in a crash, because that crash can take some time to come out of, and you don't know if you end up in that baseline. The other thing that we're noticing is the withdrawing. Once you start Tolovit, you want to make sure that you have enough so that you can keep it going over a period of times, because nobody really knows how long they're going to need it for before they start to get better. And so, that's something that we want people to realize. We've heard people say, look, I took it for 5 days. I felt a lot better. After I withdrew, I kind of was down again, but I was very happy that I felt better for those few days. That's great. People that want that. So there are some people that we see that are only looking for symptomatic benefit, and they may say, look, I've got something to do this weekend. Let me take it for a few days so I'm better on those 2 or 3 days. When I have to do something, then I'll deal with the consequences later. That's, some people are dealing with that as well. So we're learning quite a lot about how people want to use the product. And we're learning, obviously our objective is to have long-term sustained benefit, but it's going to be a journey between now and then. And so the data we're gathering is quite important. And I think, is valuable, not only for us, but, for the community to understand, what's really happening, how do I heal over time, and is there a way I can further support myself beyond just the 3-cell protease inhibitor to help my immune system ramp up.
Wow. Complicated stuff here, Gerald. So Pete Aguilar asks, on social media, there seems to be a lot of talk about viral rebound in Paxlovid patients that are only allowed to take it for 5 days. Since Tolovir and Tolovid are also a 3-cell protease inhibitors like Paxlovid, do you expect to encounter a similar issue?
Yes. So, if you're taking it within the so we did not develop Tolovir for the outpatient setting, right? So we developed it for the hospital setting. In the hospital setting, we treat for 10 days, not 5 days. So, that's priority number one. So we're actually treating for a longer period of time in our setting. And in fact, in the hospital setting, we're seeing 10 days might not be enough. It might need to be 15. It might need to be 20. Similarly, it's not surprising that for Paxlovid, especially when there's high viral load early on in the disease, that it doesn't get rid of it in 5 days because the immune system hasn't ramped up to actually clear the virus, despite the fact that you've helped slow the replication. So for us, it's not surprising. We would expect if people take Tolovid for 5 days that there is the potential for rebound, and we would expect, and we've seen that, people take it within the context of long COVID, that there is a potential for rebound. The difference between Tolovid, Tolovir, and Paxlovid is that Tolovid and Tolovir are natural supplement products that have a well-established safety profile for which you can take these products over an extended period of time. I've personally been on Tolovid for almost 2 years, and only I can think of a handful of days that I haven't taken it in the last 2 years. And so you can't do that with Paxlovid because there's a drug called ritonavir, and that ritonavir is an HIV drug, and it actually impairs endothelial cells. It creates damage, and it extends the half-life of not only the nirmatrelvir, which is the other aspect of Paxlovid, but of many other drugs. So there's drug-drug interaction and interaction with other things. And so that's really the challenge that you have with using Paxlovid on a longer-term basis, and why we think Tolovid is a nice complement, potentially. People take the Paxlovid, it's prescribed, they feel better, and then guess what? Maybe you should take some Tolovid right after that to help you not rebound. That's something that some people that we've noticed and are in the case studies actually have also noticed that there was a nice transition from Paxlovid to Tolovid, and that they could take the Tolovid and ramp down and see a sustained benefit. So it seems as though that there is definitely something to longer than 5 days.
Thank you for that. Charles D says, there haven't been any real updates on the testing business. COVID-19 appears to be on an upswing. Is that translating into more business, or is the company transitioning to a more consistent business model?
Yeah, I mean, the COVID testing business is quite cyclical. That's true. Currently, the cycle is up, so we are seeing increased testing in our lab. Yes, we are focused on kind of smoothing out the lumpiness of that business. And so we are expanding into UTI, into other aspects of PCR testing. But where we think that there's real hope for that testing business to really not only expand, but expand consistently is in the monitoring of long COVID patients and monitoring of their symptoms. And given that we have a proprietary position with Tolovid being on the market, we think that we can really establish ourselves as a premier long COVID lab. So that's the objective, and so that means that in the short term maybe we stop chasing some of those acute COVID contracts, because we did that, and we signed a bunch of deals, and then no testing happened. The government hasn't funded it. But long COVID now, there's an ICD-10 code for long COVID, and certainly the patients are disabled and need to have a clear understanding of what's going on in their body to see if, as changes over time occur, how those changes impact the biomarkers. So we see that as a quite significant market opportunity that can really expand us.
Linda G says, I saw your case study that suggests Tolovid can help erectile dysfunction. Is that a real indication that you can go after?
Well, the question of COVID-induced pretty much anything is one that we're going to, I think the regulators are going to have to figure out, because erectile dysfunction is a problem, but many people who had COVID and experienced erectile dysfunction, Viagra doesn't work for, because the problem is it's not You can't solve it with that mechanism. The problem is that the oxygen is not getting from the blood into the tissues, and so there's no energy. And that's the problem. So I would think that because the therapies are going to be different, that they're going to have no choice but to create COVID-induced, this or that, including erectile dysfunction, because the treatments associated with those symptoms are going to be dramatically different than non-COVID related aspects. But ultimately that's going to be a regulatory decision. But I personally don't see how they can avoid, how it's possible to avoid COVID-induced erectile dysfunction, COVID-induced microclots, COVID-induced blood clots, COVID-induced hypertension, COVID-induced anything, because the mechanisms of treatment are going to be fundamentally different than they are currently.
Mike Massey and Bruce Doherty ask, what's the status of a potential uplist to Nasdaq or an exchange?
So we're actively in discussions with Nasdaq. We've been going back and forth about the burn rate, the historical burn rate versus the new burn rate, obviously, because our burn has come down substantially and we're turning to profitability. And so, the cash runway that Nasdaq needs is about 12 months, and 12 months going forward looks a lot different than trailing 12 months. And so those are the negotiations that our advisor, Donahoe Advisors, are going through with Nasdaq right now. We're hopeful to get those negotiations kind of completed and then kind of clear the deck for us to be able to uplist in the second half of the year. Timing of which is not, we haven't set in stone, but we think sometime in the second half of the year that we should be able to accomplish it.
Great. Adam Welch asks about some insight into your convertible securities maybe coming to an end soon. Talk about that.
Yes, I know that's something that's extremely important for investors and for the company to be able to effectively move forward. So we have made good progress with our convertible securities holders. They understand the need for the company to move beyond the OTC markets and get to the Nasdaq, and that their securities are impacting our ability to execute upon that. We see, obviously, there hasn't been a significant change in the share count in a long period of time. So that, is indicative of lack of conversion of, debt to equity. And so now, really the key is we want to position now, and I think our investors want to see that, we are making tangible progress towards the uplist of Nasdaq. So we have an S1 that's getting ready to file. We have underwriters that are trying to structure what that offering would look like. And so they want to see that S1 filed as kind of the sign that, okay, this is about to happen. And so we're, in the middle of drafting the S1 to be able to do that. And I think ultimately that will, even though there will be some dilution associated with the uplist, that it will be viewed as a major positive event because we can uncap the value. So that's where we are with the process. It's kind of a daily grind, but we're in the middle of it, and we expect that sometime in the next few weeks we'll get a final number from Nasdaq on what we need from a burn perspective, and then we'll be in a position to just wait until the market's in the right place for us to be able to make that move.
Molly M asks, will your raise to fund long COVID be in equity or debt?
We're looking to do that as an equity raise. So one of the things that actually, interestingly, a lot of long COVID people who've used the supplement have now become shareholders. Although the challenge, of course, is that it's within the cap structure of Todos and, the question of the convertible securities, et cetera. So they're looking for other ways to more directly participate and impact the research for long COVID. And so, that's why we think allowing them to come in at an attractive valuation so they can participate in the upside, and really the benefit will be directly to that shareholder base, and that shareholder base could be strong advocates for us. We think that's the way to go.
Tom Rios asks, how are you doing with staffing when there seems to be a shortage of talent? Is your team solid? Are you looking for new talent? Are you having any trouble finding it?
I don't think we're having any trouble finding talent. We're not currently hiring. Right now we're kind of at the stage where, Todos is seated 3CL. A lot of Todos employees are working on 3CL. 3CL needs to get capitalized, and then at that point, some of those employees will move over into 3CL. And then Todos will really become Provista. And there we're fully staffed. Our lab is going, and there the only thing that we'll probably really want to increase is sales. Sales teams, and then maybe assay validation teams as we validate more assays. So no, we don't really have a problem. Our technical staff is very strong. Our marketing team, we have a good core. We've kind of made some changes there. We probably will bring on some interns over the summer to get a lot of brunt work done, and then see how that moves over time to determine whether or not we want to expand the marketing division. So that's really the division. Once it's 3CL is properly up and running, where we're going to want to expand, because there's a lot of interest both in the U.S. and internationally for Tolovit, and we see that as a big opportunity.
Great. Al Perry says, you've been in the game for a long time. Can you explain some key points that'll make your drugs dominant over the majors in the space? And which major biotech company model would your technology fit best with?
Great question. We have two different businesses, right? So it's clear. Obviously, on the diagnostics business, we'd be partnering with diagnostic companies to distribute the products. And there, the major players are known. Guardant Health, Quest, LabCorp, several others that are Exact Sciences, several others working on these kinds of programs. At this point, Illumina also has some tests in the marketplace, and they're going to be expanding. So there, from the diagnostic standpoint, there are a certain number of players, and you kind of know what position you have to be in order to engage with them. The only, let's call it, open potential there is companion diagnostics. So if there's some therapies for which people really want to use the diagnostics for, in particular, that there would be, a new emerging big pharma player that could take them on. Within the context of 3CL Pharma, there are a number of players, actually. So in Europe, there are a number of botanical drug players out in the marketplace, as well as in Asia. In the U.S., it's more big pharma, but we do see biologics and natural products playing a bigger role over time because they simply have fewer side effects. And that's really one of the keys now for the American consumer, with pharma, tire side effects. And so that really positions us well because we don't necessarily have those side effects that some of these other COVID-related products have. That's what I would say. And then obviously where we're displacing potentially other highly profitable products. So for example, our drug plus remdesivir is better than remdesivir alone, but we don't really look at remdesivir as something significant in the hospital setting. So when we're displacing a product there that, there's sales force already established and infrastructure for that kind of target market, that's another opportunity where we see someone potentially wanting to get involved to basically just swap out their product for our product. So now there are a number of ways and areas that we could partner. And we see that we kind of have to drive the regulatory in a certain direction. And then once that regulatory engagement is in a certain direction and has achieved a certain level of status, then there'll be certain buyers that would want to step up and enter it to be able to expand and distribute.
Great. Edward Kasparovich and Harold Kaufman want to know, do you know if Pfizer is aware of your product that's helped patients after taking their COVID pill? And are you speaking with big pharma companies about partnering?
So I can't comment on the partnering discussion because obviously we have, NDAs in place. I'm sure that Pfizer is aware of Tolovit. I'd be quite surprised if they weren't. I'm sure they're aware of Tolovir as well. Again, Dr. Arad, is one of the discoverers of the 3CL protease, and the assays that were developed that allowed for Paxlovid to be developed were developed at least the basis for them were developed by Dr. Arad. So there's no doubt that they're aware of us. And the question over time, as we build more data, as people get more comfortable with the product, as we show that we can scale, we'll see how that engagement goes. But certainly helping to support and getting case studies and data around Paxlovid, we think is important for the community because, there are new issues popping up with Paxlovid that we didn't know before, and we think that we can be helpful there. So, being helpful given the scale of what the government's trying to do with Paxlovid, we think will only serve the purpose to benefit 3CL Pharma.
Last question from Beverly Carlson. Some people are saying long COVID has a psychological component. What's your opinion on that?
Well, so my opinion is that long COVID is absolutely not psychological. It's very fundamentally autoimmune driven and viral persistence driven, and that viral persistence is leading to an inability to transfer oxygen. Now, when those things happen, obviously people can get depressed. So I would say that the psychiatric stuff is the tail wagging the dog. It's not that it can't be involved. It can be involved, but that's not what's driving long COVID. What's driving long COVID is a fundamental biological, physical problem. And when you have that physical problem over a long period of time, it can get you down and lead to other things. But we've also seen, and we've had people who were depressed, used our product, felt better, and lo and behold, the other aspects, the anxiety or the depression went away. So, it's not, I don't think you can look at it within the context of, well, if I just give them a depression drug, everything's going to be, there's still, if you can't walk, if you can't go to work, if you can't go see your friends, doesn't matter how many depression drugs you take, that's not going to change things. So no, we think it's a fundamental, biological problem that, can have downstream effects, like anything can if it debilitates somebody.
Yep. Well, thank you, Gerald. As always, if you'd love to give us some closing remarks, this has been a fascinating presentation.
No, the only closing remarks are, thank you for being shareholders. We know that there's tremendous interest in what we're doing. We didn't expect to be in this kind of unique position to have what seems like the only product on the market that can be used in this huge indication, but it looks like it is. It's not approved, as a drug, and I know many people want a lot more answers around it as if it was a drug, but we're working diligently to get those answers, and hopefully we'll be able to further drive information as we scale. We look to be able to bring down the cost of the patient. And ultimately, if we can get regulatory authorization and reimbursement, then it could be something that could be really scaled to everybody. And so that, that's something that we recognize we're working towards.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us again on the conference, and we look forward to seeing you again with your updates.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. Thanks for watching. Stay with us. We're going to come right back with our next presenter.